Hi guys, we did an interesting video on Wild Rift. So we're back with yet another tier list, of course, for patch 2.5. So I just released the best bans video a couple of days ago, and I actually want to do the tier list first because I normally do the tier list first and then I base my best bans off the tier list. But in this case, I was more confident of who the best bans was and I was less confident of the tier list. So I needed a few more days of playing some ranked, a few more days of testing out some of these characters to bring you guys this particular tier list. So, without further ado, let's get into the tier list itself. So clearly, we can already see at the top of the S plus tier, I have Tryndamere for the Baron lane. Now, you guys might be wondering why Tryndamere, because I'm sure we all know even before this latest update, like any Tryndamere is very annoying to deal with his Undying Rage, and any good Tryndamere who knows his limits, plays around his ultimate cooldown, and just plays in general not super ham, he's gonna be doing very well. Now, Tryndameres have a tendency to just get a Bloodlust and just go under like 2 towers for the kill when they have their ultimate on, and then they cannot escape after that because they ran out of their ultimate, and that is still very common in Tryndameres. But mark my words, when people start getting good at Tryndamere and stop greeding for kills, Tryndamere will be the best Baron lane champion. Now, he can really do quite well into majority of the Baron lane champions as long as you know your matchups and you know your limits. Of course, if you just stand there and fight a Fiora 1v1 or fight a Riven 1v1, like without spinning in, spinning out, and knowing how to trade properly, probably you're gonna be dying because he's not like the best champion in the extended trades. But you really win trades by stacking your passive and getting a lot of like lucky crits in a way, and just knowing how much damage you can deal and how much damage you can take. So when people learn how to play Tryndamere properly, he's definitely going to be the best champion. I'm already putting him as the best champion in the Baron lane, already. Fiora, of course, is still there. She hasn't really been touched. Riven actually moved up from S tier because I think I've been underrating her a lot. Now, we have reached the point where people are finally good at Riven. Like, we all know that there are all of these champions like Thresh, Katarina, Riven, Irelia, all these hard-to-play champions that take generally 3 or more patches to really seem overpowered, because that's when people have truly like gotten good at them and they seem like a menace, and Riven is at that state now. Now, she has caught a nerf on her Q's damage as well as her E's cooldown, but the nerfs are so minute, it doesn't really affect her all that much. So in my opinion, she is still in S plus tier. In S, we still have the same usual culprits. We have Camille, Renekton. Gragas moves down from S plus just because of how many nerfs he's been getting, and now they're sort of forcing him into an AP Gragas sort of build because tank Gragas isn't so effective anymore. I do think that maybe he might be dropping further down the tier list a little bit later on, but for now, preemptively, I'm putting him still in S, but not even at the top of S, somewhere in the middle of S. Malphite, always good he's always like a good pick just because of his ultimate. Like, especially for someone who gets autofilled top, Malphite will always be good just to get through the laning phase and then help your team in team fights. Garen, still really tanky, still really good, and Graves is actually in the middle of S, and I do think that Graves in the Baron lane still has legs and he's still really good, just that people started playing him in the Baron lane when he got buffed, and the moment he got nerfed once, and I think it was only his Q and some of his base stats that got nerfed. It wasn't a very huge nerf, but people like dropped him in the Baron lane altogether. But I do still think that Graves in the Baron lane is still pretty good because his dueling potential against any of these characters is still pretty alright. Like, of course, he's strongest when he has like 3 items, but even so, he is still pretty good in the early levels, like 1v1 against these characters. Of course, you have to be kiting them and using your range, but if not, Graves is still pretty good, and I still think he's S tier in the Baron lane. Now, Wukong and Darius on the cusp of being S tier. Wukong, of course, Baron lane has been getting buffed, and I have fought some Wukongs in the Baron lane, and their sustain on their Q is honestly really good after that got buffed. And Wukong Baron lane has been getting buffed a lot, so he is really rising up the ranks. I do think he's gonna hit S tier probably sooner or later. Darius is sort of like, I always think that actually anybody can really carry on Darius if the enemy team doesn't know how to play against you, but at the same time, if they do know how to play against you, you won't be doing too well. So I think A is a good middle ground. Kennen for the ults, Irelia and Akali still staying at the same spot, and the rest of the tier list is roughly the same, but I have actually included Jarvan in the B tier. Now this is just because Jarvan actually has pretty good matchups against some of these champions. Now for example, Jarvan against Kennen, Jarvan against like Wukong, Jarvan against Darius, Jarvan against Garen, Malphite. Even Graves isn't too bad of a matchup against, so it's not too bad. He has really a lot of good matchups, and that's just because you max your Q and you just poke them out in the lane. Like, you just play the poking game, sort of like how a Malphite lane. So you just play safe, poke them with your Q, you poke them with your E as well, because in case you guys didn't know, when you drop your flag on them, it also does damage, and normally you use it for your flag and drag, but just using your E for poke also works really well. So you just poke them out, poke them out, poke them out, and you know, some people just can't lane against it. People like Kennen, for example, he has like no sustain, and he doesn't have enough range to actually auto attack you if you're just queuing and Eing him. So that is that. Lucian and Vayne, I've actually moved them down by a tier just because they're a little bit more of a situational pick. So I don't think they should be B tier. Probably C tier is a little bit better. And yeah, the rest of it is the same. So now we're gonna move on to the jungle. Alright, so now on to the jungle. In my opinion, Lee Sin is still the best despite the nerfs he got to his W. Now, make no mistake, I do think that these nerfs do indeed affect him. You know, they do impact him. And it's not like some placebo nerf where you don't really feel any nerf at all. You do feel the nerf, but I do still feel that he is very, very strong. So I do still think he is the best jungler in the game. Now, followed, of course, by Tryndamere, who I've already covered, that is completely busted right now and definitely needs to get nerfed. It's sort of like when they buffed Master Yi to the moon for no real good reason, and Master Yi took over the meta. I think Tryndamere is sort of in that situation where they buffed him to the moon for no apparent good reason, and now he's just super duper strong. So Tryndamere jungle is really good as well. Nunu, I think, is rising. His stock is rising a lot. He's very strong in ganks. Xin Zhao, really strong early game. Graves, really strong carry potential in the later stages of the game. Very fast and healthy, clear. Really good for especially off-roll junglers like me, like when I get autofill jungle. Riven, of course, completely broken, so in the jungle role as well, still completely broken, so still all the way up there. Kha'Zix did catch a lot of nerfs, but if you can play Kha'Zix properly, he is still at the bottom of S tier. If not, if you can't play Kha'Zix, he's probably at the top of B tier or the bottom of A tier. In the A tier, we have Rengar, who can still carry because of his one-shot potential. Probably the best jungle assassin. Evelynn is honestly just there because she is really the only AP jungler you can play. So sometimes when your team is full AD and you have to play AP jungle, really Evelynn is your best bet. We will talk about Fizz, Diana later, as you guys can see down the tier list. Olaf, I actually put him down up all the way back up to the A tier. Now, just because that in the current meta there's so much CC. Now, not even taking into account other lanes, just look at what's above him. There's Evelynn Charm, Nunu's, all of Nunu's CC, Xin Zhao's knock-up, all of Riven's CC, her knock-up, her stun, Tryndamere's slow. There is so much CC in the current meta. I think Tryndamere is actually, not Tryndamere, I think Olaf is actually a very good pick in a lot of situations because of just how much CC that there is, especially against all those immobile characters who rely on their CC to peel for them. A lot of those around, like for example Senna in the support, you will see later that she's pretty high up on the support tier list. So a lot of people playing a lot of these kind of characters, like, you know, maybe like Annie's, Luxus, all these kind of champions that rely on their CC to peel for them, and Olaf just hard counters all of them. Brand is another really good example. So Olaf's stock is rising as well. Now for the rest of the tier list, B tier remains the same, except Shyvana moves up a little bit just because of how many junglers have gotten worse. She's just gotten better in comparison, plus that small little buff. Now in the C tier, Wukong drops all the way down to the C tier. Now I will say that his passive not applying to jungle camps affects his clear quite a bit, and by the time you reach the Scull, if you do a 3 camp clear like red, raptors, blue into Scull, you will only have half health remaining, and I have tested this out, and you will only have half health remaining, so your Scull fight is gonna be way weaker. But of course, if you can navigate the early game, when you get some items, your clear is gonna be like, I wouldn't say it's the same, but it's not gonna be affected too much, and your main impact is in your team fight, so I haven't dropped him down as much as I could have. Not like Camille and Diana, which we will cover momentarily, but Wukong still brings a lot of value, so he's still not too bad. Fizz also drops down because his jungle clear is really bad, especially compared to everybody like in the B tier and above. His jungle clear is really bad, really unhealthy, so he really can't do too well. Bran is way too blue buff reliant, and down in the D tier, we find Camille, who used to be like in the S or S plus tier. Now her jungle clear is shot. Like the nerf to her E not applying onto jungle monsters has just made Camille jungle dead essentially. Jungle Camille just simply doesn't work anymore. Her clear is horrendous. Like, just if you don't get a leash, just clearing your red and your raptors already takes up like 3/4 of your health, and that is after you actually smite the red, and I even smite the raptors, and by the time I get to the blue buff, I basically can't even I wouldn't say I can't even clear anymore. I can still clear the blue buff, but basically I'm on the brink of dying. It's so bad, it's worse than someone like a Fizz. Like, all the enemy jungle needs to do is just walk into your jungle and you're dead. Like, even if I was in a Mumu walking into your jungle, I still think I can kill the Camille. Of course, if she has her E down. If not, she's just gonna hookshot away. But really, Camille jungle is dead. Now, Diana jungle has no legs, really, because she did get only a 10% increase to jungle monsters. I've tested out her clear. Her clear is pretty horrible. She's not viable in the jungle at all, but I still gotta include her in the tier list because confirmed, definitely people will be actually wondering about Diana jungle herself and whether it works or not. So, regardless, rest of the tier list, you guys can take a look at it for yourself. And now we're going to move on to the mid lane. Alright, so now for the mid lane, as you guys can see in the top of the S plus tier, we have Veigar. Now Veigar really, he's very overtuned, his numbers are insane. He is incredibly easy to play. Now, even if you don't like know how to do anything, even if you auto target like your Q and your W, it likely is gonna hit. Of course, your W is not gonna hit unless they're CC'd, which most of the time it will be from your cage, which even if you anyhow plonk it anywhere, likely the enemies are still gonna be trapped or zoned away, or if anyone gets CC'd, you just point it up, you just like button mash all your abilities, likely you will still do well. Like, no joke. The only thing you need to know how to do is to farm your stacks in the early game, which basically just means last hitting minions with either your Q or your W, which it really isn't that hard after you get used to it, like after a game or two. So Veigar at the moment really broken, and yeah. After him, we have Ziggs, who of course is still as broken as before. The nerfs did nothing too much to help him. And Bran, honestly, I was considering putting him in the S tier, but honestly, I still think he's very broken just because of how solo queue nature is, where everybody's just gonna group up and there is no organization, so everybody's gonna get hit by the Bran W as well as his ultimate. So Bran, in my opinion, is really good for solo queue just because of that. And in the S tier, a lot of the champions remain the same. Akali, Zed, Corki, Orianna, Irelia, and Galio. Of course, I believe Akali, Zed, and Corki moving down from the S+, just because I feel that Veigar, Ziggs, and Bran is a cut above them. And Katarina actually moves up from A to S, because lately I have been getting destroyed by a number of Katarinas. Now, of course, last time a lot of people who didn't know how to play Katarina picked Katarina just because of how broken her numbers were. But now she's actually balanced in a sense that, like Akali, if you're not good at Katarina, it probably will show. But whoever picks Katarina at this point in time, you know that they can play Katarina, and you can't expect to get destroyed by them. So, Katarina indeed is bottom of S tier in my opinion. A tier remains about the same. Twisted Fate, Diana, Yasuo, Ahri actually moves up from, I believe it was the B tier, just because Ari actually is really strong. I've been underrating her. Her pick potential with her charm is insane. I have played with like a couple of Aris that hit like literally what I feel like is 100% of their charms. I really don't see them missing any charms, and just how many picks they can get is just absolutely insane. So a good Ari can change the game. Now Lucian actually drops down from the S tier because I don't really think he's that good anymore. B tier remains the same, and Annie actually moves up from the C tier because Annie, I think, it's actually not too bad. Even after they adjusted her ultimate, I do think she can still do pretty well, and the rest of the tier list is the same. So with that out of the way, we're going to move on to my favorite to cover, which is AD Carry. Alright, so now on to AD Carry, which doesn't even have a D tier, just because, as usual, what I always say, AD Carry, all of them are really very similar. Now, I even think Jhin and Tristana are viable in the meta. Like, I even think that Jhin and Tristana can win games, and not just because you pick a low tier pick, you auto lose the game, which, I mean, kind of is true for every role, but I feel it is the most so for AD Carry. Now, at the top S plus tier, no changes there. Kai'Sa, Ezreal, Xayah is still the same. S tier has had quite a few adjustments, mainly Varus and Vayne going all the way to the top of S tier. And I think Varus is really good. Especially the Lethality Varus is very good into squishy comps. But of course, as I covered in all of my Varus videos, you always want to have the correct team composition for your team and the enemy team to pick Varus. But into those scenarios, he does very outstanding. Now, of course, every AD carry has an ideal scenario. You can, of course, pick up Varus in a non-ideal scenario, and I still think he is pretty good. Just probably not top of S tier, maybe bottom of S tier, but I still think Varus is really good. Vayne, honestly, after playing Vayne for so much, I really do think she is S tier. Now, she's gone a long way from being the worst AD carry to now being one of the best AD carries. Her carry potential is insane. You just need to play safe and navigate the early game, which her early game, it really isn't even that weak anymore. Like, her early game is honestly okay at the moment. Like, if you get a jungle gank, or even like in a 2v2, a lot of people underestimate Vayne, and you can actually get some solo kills, 2v2 kills I should say, in the bottom lane. So Vayne, I really think is very strong, so much carry potential and so good. Corki is there just because of you need a magic damage ADC option, and Corki is still doing very well. Lucian still hanging on for dear life at the bottom of the S tier. Ziggs and Veigar are another two mage AP options, which honestly, just because like they're only S tier in the ADC role because of how broken they are. As you guys can see, they're the two best mid laners, Ziggs and Veigar. So they're really they're just because the champions itself are very strong, so they are also strong in the AD carry role. I have tested Veigar in AD carry, and he plays about the same as mid Veigar. Just it's a little bit hard to get stacks just because of how much range there is in the bot lane compared to mid lane, where you could be against a melee matchup. So, but he plays roughly the same. He's still very good. Fasting Senna, still really good. Draven, of course, will always be good for his one trick. Jinx, honestly, is still good, but just that she brings less to the table than like the people above her. Xayah is probably like a better team fighter, although Jinx probably can carry harder later into the game. Akshan's still viable in the ADC role as well. I've actually moved Ashe and Miss Fortune up, and I've actually moved Jhin down. Ashe, I have had a lot of matches where the enemy Ashe picks, there is an enemy Ashe pick into a for the utility into like a comp that already has a lot of damage, and we do get destroyed by the Ashe just because of her arrows, her slows, and yeah. So I'm not gonna underrate Ashe too much anymore. I have also tried Ashe out. I don't think she's too bad, but I don't think she's that good either, so B tier seems like an okay spot for her. Same story for Miss Fortune. She does well with certain comps, like for example with a Malphite or an Amumu. She can still work out pretty well, and her damage is still pretty alright. Now Jhin and Tristan, unfortunately, the two energized users, unfortunately the energized items didn't buff didn't really help them all that much, just because they really, the two of them are still really bad, which is very unfortunate. Waiting for the day that my boy Jhin becomes good again so that I can play him in ranked again, but at this point in time, Jhin and Tristan are really not too good. Tristana's main issue really is how hard she is to control on mobile, how difficult it is to select who you will put the bomb on and who you're auto-attacking. Sometimes you end up putting the bomb on like let's say the enemy Nami, and you end up autoing the enemy Lucian. You know, sometimes that happens. Sometimes you want to put the bomb on the Lucian, but you put the bomb on the Nami by mistake. And, you know, all these kind of things, it makes it really hard to execute Tristana to a high level. So Tristana, not only is it hard in terms of ease of execution, but even if you execute it well, it doesn't even work out all that much. So Tristana really just down in the dumpster. Same for farming Senna. Farming Senna is the worst you could possibly pick for AD carry. So that's pretty much it for the AD carries. We're not going to talk about the supports. Okay, now on to the supports. Now finally, I have bought into Nami being the best. Now as you guys know, I played for like almost a year duoing with a Nami one trick. So I really do know the power of the Nami, and Nami really is very lane dominant of a pick, just because her W trading in lane is just insane, and her healing and buffing is just insane. Catch potential from a bubble, the wave. It just really, I think Nami at the moment is the best support, followed by Lulu, who can really help anybody in the team become like so much stronger. And Lulu is just so annoying because sometimes, like, you know, especially in the lane, like let's say a Vayne and a Lulu, like you think you got her, but the Lulu just buffs her. Her attack speed goes up, her shielding comes in, and you just can't kill the Vayne. Like Lulu is really irritating of a support, really good at buffing her ally, so really she deserves to be second best support. Thresh and Senna actually moves up. Now Senna, just because solo queue, playing Senna, you always have a chance to carry, so she will always be like S or S plus unless she gets nerfed to the ground. Thresh, as I said in my best bans, people have gotten really good at Thresh, and Thresh can do so much for your team, catching people out, you know, disengaging for your team, re-engaging for your team, catching people who come too close with your Flay, preventing escapes from box. He can do so much. He is definitely in S plus if you can play him. Now Janna unfortunately moves down from S plus to S. Now not because she is not strong anymore, just because the people above her are probably better, but Janna's still really good. Braum's still really good situational pick into the correct comp, like with a lot of projectiles. Rakan and Leona still amazing. Two of the best hard engaged tanks. I mean, unless you count I wouldn't really count Thresh as hard engaged. I'll count him more as a playmaker, so I think Rakan and Leona are the two best hard engaged supports. Brand's support is still there just because of how OP Brand is in solo queue. Lux, Seraphine, Alistar, and Galio stay where they are, and likewise for the B to the D tier. Nothing too much to cover here, no real changes to the supports. I'm really considering taking out Annie, Malphite, and Pantheon just because I really haven't actually seen all of them in some time, so probably I'll remove them away from the support tier list in my next video. But regardless, thank you guys for watching the video. We've reached the end, and goodbye.